But we begin tonight with soccer, with massive national political and social upheaval writ very, very small on the uniforms of a single soccer team playing 4,000 miles away from its home. The World Cup is the biggest sporting event in the world. It's as big as the Olympics. The next one is next year in South Africa, and the countries that want to compete in the World Cup are playing their qualifying matches right now. Today, as the national soccer team of Iran faced off against South Korea, at least 8 members of the Iranian team took the field wearing green wristbands, presumably in a sign of support for the huge opposition movement that now may be threatening to topple the ruling regime in their country. Iranian fans in the stands wore green as well. Some made their support for the opposition, their own opposition to their government, all the more plain, with signs promoting the main opposition candidate. And, well, there was this guy who chose to make his point clear as a bell with a sign that read, "Go to hell, dictator." That's very to the point. But consider what these fans, and especially these players, are risking by doing this. Back home in Iran, today the top prosecutor in the city of Isfahan declared that anyone demonstrating against the government could be executed for doing so. Quote, "We warn the few elements controlled by foreigners who try to disrupt domestic security by inciting individuals to destroy and to commit arson, that the Islamic penal code for such individuals waging war against God is execution." Also recall that the news yesterday that 7 protesters had been killed at demonstrations, that was not news that was circulated by the protesters themselves. That was not aggregated through things posted to various social media sites or something. That was a claim made and repeated by Iranian state media. The government eager to confirm the implicit threat of deadly force against Iranians who would defy the ban on demonstrations. We've also heard reports of Iranians receiving robocalls in which a disembodied voice informs the person receiving the call that he or she has been seen protesting. The International Campaign for Human Rights in Iran has posted a list of dozens of human rights activists and lawyers and academics who have been arrested or detained in what they're describing as a purge of reform-oriented individuals. But even as television coverage of the massive banned protests in Iran are essentially blacked out inside that country, soccer is the most popular sport in Iran by a mile. They really can't block out coverage of a World Cup qualifying match. So for these young men to have made this show of support, knowing it would be televised, knowing that they have absolutely no anonymity, they're the Iranian national soccer team, for Christ's sakes. It was kind of a stunning act of political bravery. At halftime, these young men returned to the field without those green wristbands on. You can't really blame them. 4,000 miles west of that playing field in Iran, all demonstrations were banned again today, which of course meant that Tehran looked like this. Another massive anti-government demonstration. 5 straight days of these demonstrations so far, and there's yet another one that has been called for tomorrow. Now, I want to show you one quick clip in particular. It's about 30 seconds long. It's actually less than 30 seconds. Now, this was not taken by a news organization. It was taken by a participant at today's march, as best as we can tell. And we're just going to play it here, including the actual sound from the tape, because the sound and the images together show a couple of amazing things about how these huge demonstrations are being conducted and what this uprising is like in Iran. The first thing that you'll notice is that the march is essentially silent. People are moving through the streets of Tehran in processions that are miles long, without chanting, mostly without even speaking. It's hundreds of thousands of people silent. The other thing you can see in this clip is after about 15 seconds, apparently what is happening here is that the militia is approaching. The Bashi, they say, and forgive my pronunciation, that's as best as I can tell how to pronounce it. They're volunteer paramilitary militiamen, essentially, who answer to the Revolutionary Guard. The Bashi have been blamed for some of the worst violence of these last 5 days. Now, as best as we can tell from this clip, as the Bashi approach this silent demonstration, watch what the demonstrators do. You can hear the call going through the crowd. As the Bashi, the militia, the paramilitaries are approaching the silent protest, the protesters just spread the word and sit down. This is a movement that is being denounced as wild arsonists, as rioters incited by foreign elements. But look at how they're comporting themselves. The main opposition candidate, Mir Hossein Mousavi, is encouraging more protests. He says he will participate in protests himself. Now, the size of tomorrow's rally and the reaction to it by government forces will tell us a lot about whether this movement is tapering off or whether it's becoming unstoppable. Today, the prospect of success for the opposition, actually changing the ruling regime in Iran, seemed more possible than it ever has before because of two developments. First, an apparent split at the very top of the regime. Iran's single most senior cleric, his name is Grand Ayatollah Hossein al-Montazeri, a man seen as a rival of the current supreme leader. He came out in support of the opposition. He denounced the election results as fraudulent. He called on Iranian police officers and soldiers to disobey orders to act against the protesters. He wrote on his official website, quote, "A government not respecting people's vote has no religious or political legitimacy. I ask the police and the army not to sell their religion and to beware that receiving orders will not excuse them before God." A split at the top among the clerics. In addition, an emergency meeting was called, something today called the Assembly of Experts. It's a body of 86 members. It's a body that chooses the supreme leader. They could even oust the current supreme leader if they wanted to. After watching this story unfold for 5 days, many Americans have been expecting this to be, frankly, Tiananmen Square, a rebellion to be crushed. Is it possible that a better metaphor here might end up being the Berlin Wall coming down? I mean, everybody still fears a bloody crackdown on the resistance, but could the resistance actually win?